Something about the way your dog watches you at night feels different, and you notice it the moment you wake up. You open your eyes and they are already looking at you, completely still and fully aware. It is not dramatic or alarming, but it feels intentional in a way that is hard to ignore. And once you notice it, it starts to stand out more often. Because it did not always feel like this, even if you cannot remember exactly when it changed. There was a time when your dog would stay asleep longer or react after you moved. Now it feels like they are already aware before you are fully awake. And that difference is what you are actually picking up on. Most people dismiss this moment because nothing else seems unusual at first. The dog is calm, not restless, not reacting with anxiety or excitement. But the fact that your dog is already watching you before you move is not random. It is a signal. Because dogs do not stay alert without reason, especially when they should be resting. When your dog is relaxed but still watching you, it means its attention is still connected to you. That level of awareness does not switch off completely, and that changes how the interaction works. Think about the last time this happened and how quickly you noticed it. You opened your eyes and your dog was already focused on you without needing to react. It was not responding to movement, it was already there before the movement happened. And that timing is what makes it feel different. Because a dog that is fully resting reacts after something changes, but a dog that is already watching is responding before the change occurs. That shift from reaction to anticipation is subtle but important, and it changes the structure of the behavior. At first, it feels too small to matter in any meaningful way. A quiet moment, a simple glance, something easy to overlook. But then it happens again and the pattern begins to repeat, and repetition is what gives the moment meaning. Because what used to feel like normal rest now feels slightly more aware and attentive. Your dog is still calm and still quiet, but not fully disengaged from you. That partial awareness becomes consistent over time. And that consistency is where the shift begins. Because a dog that is fully relaxed is not actively monitoring you in that way. But a dog that is watching, even while resting, is still processing your presence. That processing introduces a different level of attention, and that attention changes everything. Because the moment your dog begins to stay aware instead of fully resting, it is no longer simply reacting. It is tracking you continuously, even in a low-energy state. And tracking creates anticipation rather than response. And anticipation changes timing. At first, you may not notice it clearly during the day. Your dog still behaves normally, still responds, still follows when expected. But something about the timing begins to feel slightly different, and that difference becomes easier to notice over time. Because now your dog is already aware before you act. It looks at you before you fully move. It focuses before you complete a signal. That early awareness carries into other interactions, and that is what begins to reshape behavior. Because once your dog starts anticipating instead of reacting, that process does not stay limited to one situation. It begins to influence how your dog responds throughout the day. It watches earlier, processes earlier, and prepares earlier. And that preparation changes everything. You may notice it when you stand up and your dog is already watching before you take a step. Or when you call your dog and it is already focused before you finish speaking. Those moments feel small, but they are consistent. And that consistency is what matters. Because before, your dog responded to what happened. Now, it is preparing for what is about to happen instead. That shift from reaction to anticipation changes the timing of every interaction. And timing is what defines connection. Because when your dog is fully aligned with you, everything feels immediate and synchronized. Movement happens together without delay or hesitation. But when anticipation replaces reaction, a gap begins to form, and that gap becomes noticeable over time. That gap is not physical distance, but timing distance between you and your dog. A delay between what your dog sees and what it does next. That delay may only be a moment, but it changes how everything feels. And that feeling is what you are noticing. Because the dog is still connected, still responsive, and still engaged in the interaction. But the immediacy is no longer the same as it once was. The response is slightly delayed, slightly less automatic. And that difference is what defines the shift. Because behavior is not just about what your dog does, but how it does it. The speed, the the certainty, and the consistency all reflect how your dog understands you. When those elements change, the behavior changes with them, and that change is what you are experiencing. And this is where most owners become confused about what is happening. Nothing dramatic has occurred, and nothing obvious has gone wrong. But the interaction no longer feels as synchronized or automatic, and that loss of synchronization is the signal. Because when a dog is fully connected, everything happens without delay or evaluation. Movement, attention, and response all align naturally in real time. But when that connection shifts even slightly, evaluation begins. And evaluation always introduces hesitation. Once hesitation becomes part of the interaction, it begins to spread across behaviors. It moves into movement, into attention, and into engagement patterns. Over time, it reshapes how your dog interacts with you in multiple situations. And that is where the shift becomes clear. Because your dog is always learning from patterns, not isolated moments, what repeats becomes meaningful, and what becomes meaningful shapes behavior. These repeated moments create a structure your dog follows, and that structure defines how it responds. And that is why the smallest moments matter more than the obvious ones. Not because they stand out individually, but because they repeat consistently. A glance, a pause, a moment of awareness before movement. And together, those moments build the behavior you see. Because in the end, your dog is not reacting to a single moment. It is responding to a pattern it has learned over time. That pattern determines how it moves, how it responds, and how it engages with you. And it all started with a moment that felt too small to matter. And this is where the pattern becomes easier to recognize the more you pay attention to it. Because once you see it clearly, you begin to notice it in moments that felt ordinary before. Your dog watching you before you move, responding before you finish a signal, staying aware even when it seems relaxed. And those moments all reflect the same underlying shift. Because what your dog is doing is not reacting to isolated events, but following a structure it has built over time. That structure is based on what repeats, what stays consistent, and what leads to clear outcomes. And once that structure changes, behavior changes with it. And that change carries across every interaction. This is why the difference feels subtle at first but becomes clearer over time. Not because anything dramatic happens, but because the timing continues to shift. Your dog is still engaged, still responsive, still connected, but the immediacy is no longer the same. And that difference is what you are actually experiencing. Because when response is immediate, there is no gap between what your dog sees and what it does. But when response becomes delayed, even slightly, that gap becomes part of the interaction. And once that gap becomes consistent, it reshapes how everything feels. And that is where the shift becomes permanent. You may begin to notice that your dog positions itself differently around you without you realizing it at first. It watches more before moving, pauses more before responding, and checks more before engaging. Those small adjustments are not random. They follow the same pattern, and that pattern continues to reinforce itself over time. Because each moment of hesitation confirms the structure your dog is following. The more it repeats, the more stable it becomes. And once it becomes stable, it defines how your dog responds across different situations. And that is what makes the change consistent. And this is why the smallest signals matter more than the obvious ones. Not because they stand out on their own, but because they repeat without interruption. A glance, a pause, a moment of awareness before action. And those repeated moments shape the behavior you see. Because in the end, your dog is not reacting to what happens once. It is responding to what it has learned to expect. That expectation is built from everything it notices over time. And that expectation is what drives every response.